Welcome, and let's be clear from the start. This is not a minor charity footnote or a recycled scandal dragged up for drama. It is a case study in how power, money, and silence collide when ethical judgment fails. The Wild Aid controversy sits at the heart of celebrity charity culture and royal reputation management, exposing what happens when moral authority is treated as branding rather than responsibility. In February 2014, internal correspondence circulated within Wild Aid announcing the launch of new wildlife trade public service announcements in London, a campaign fronted by Prince William alongside global figures such as David Beckham and Yao Ming. Embedded within that same forwarded email was a reference to Jeffrey Epstein's support, linking donor language directly to campaign activity that leaned heavily on royal involvement. That single connection is where the story truly begins, because once a convicted sex offender's name appears in messaging tied to a royal-backed initiative, no amount of later clarification can fully undo the damage. Wild Aid later argued that Epstein's donation did not fund Williams' filmed participation and that the videos had been produced earlier in 2013, before the donation was received. That defense may be technically accurate, but it misses the real problem, which is not whether Epstein paid a specific production invoice, but whether his money was accepted and discussed in a context that traded on royal credibility. Charities that rely on high-profile ambassadors do not operate in a vacuum. Their communications shape perception, and perception is the currency that gives those ambassadors influence. Once Epstein's name appeared in internal messaging tied to a campaign featuring a senior royal, reputational risk was no longer hypothetical. By 2014, Epstein's criminal conviction was public record. His association with Prince Andrew had been widely reported for years and had already inflicted lasting reputational harm on the monarchy. This was not hidden information that only emerged later. Accepting his donation was therefore not an innocent oversight, but a conscious decision taken in full view of the risk. Wild Aid stated that the donation was unsolicited and properly disclosed in its public accounts. But disclosure is not the same as due diligence. A charity can comply with accounting rules and still fail ethically if it does not screen donors in a way that protects its ambassadors from foreseeable controversy. The issue deepened when further emails from March 2014 emerged, showing that Wild Aid continued to engage Epstein as a donor worth cultivating. One message invited him to a private dinner in New York with senior charity figures and a celebrity supporter to discuss wildlife trade campaigns. Wild Aid later said that no meetings ever took place and that no staff member met Epstein or his team. That explanation addresses outcomes, but not intent. The emails reveal a willingness to build a relationship, not a desire to maintain distance. On social media, particularly Twitter, critics focus on this point because it undermines claims that the donation was passively received and quickly forgotten. Attempting to arrange private access signals value, not reluctance. This raises unavoidable questions about basic donor checks. Epstein's conviction and his links to Prince Andrew were already well known, making the reputational risk obvious, especially for a charity whose public profile was amplified by royal involvement. The decision to proceed anyway suggests that fundraising priorities outweighed ethical caution. Kensington Palace's response added another layer of concern. Officials said the correspondence was a matter for Wild Aid and declined to comment on whether any donor checks were carried out. While this stance may protect the palace legally, it does little to reassure the public. When public figures lend their names to charitable campaigns, there is an expectation of shared responsibility. Royal involvement is not passive branding, it is an endorsement that elevates a charity's status and reach. Silence in the face of controversy reads as avoidance rather than leadership. The palace's narrow response also contrasts sharply with how quickly it acts when issues become impossible to ignore.
This gap between proactive oversight and reactive damage control is what keeps stories like this alive. It is not just about Epstein or Wild Aid, but about how institutions manage risk when prestige and money intersect. The argument that no laws were broken does not resolve the ethical question at the heart of the issue, which is whether accepting support from a convicted sex offender was ever compatible with the moral authority projected by a royal-fronted conservation campaign.
The Wild Aid episode is best understood not as an isolated misstep, but as part of a recurring pattern in royal-adjacent fundraising, where reputational safeguards appear weak until public exposure forces action. This pattern became even clearer in June 2025, when a leaked email revealed that Minerva Mondahar Steiner, a Filipino-Swiss art patron listed as a sponsor of the Royal Charity Polo Cup in Windsor, had offered wealthy clients a private audience with Prince William for £20,000. When the Sunday Times reported the offer, Kensington Palace cut ties within hours and stated that William did not support paid access. The speed of that response helped contain the fallout, but it also exposed a troubling reality. The offer was made in the first place because systems designed to prevent such abuses failed quietly. Only media scrutiny triggered decisive action. On Twitter, users quickly drew parallels between the Polo Cup scandal and the earlier Wild Aid situation. In both cases, the defense rested on separation. William did not authorize the offer. William did not benefit financially. William did not personally interact with the problematic individual. Yet, separation does not eliminate responsibility when a royal association is central to fundraising appeal. The value being sold is proximity to a future king, whether through charity branding or implied access. That is why critics argue that stronger controls should exist long before emails leak or journalists start calling. The Wild Aid defense similarly relies on compartmentalization. The videos were filmed earlier, the donation was unsolicited, no meetings happened. Each statement narrows liability without addressing the broader issue of judgment. Charities that lean on celebrity ambassadors must treat donor reputation as part of campaign integrity, not as an afterthought. Accepting money from Epstein and referencing his support alongside royal-backed initiatives undermined that integrity regardless of timing. Social media discourse increasingly frames this as a credibility problem rather than a technical one. Many users point out that institutions claiming moral leadership, whether in conservation or public service, cannot afford selective ethics. Environmental causes, in particular, depend on trust. When donors with notorious histories are welcomed, that trust erodes, and the ambassadors associated with the costs are left exposed. The palace's refusal to